why, even within Islam, do you have a conflict between Shia and Sunni?
Well, in jurisprudence there is no conflict, but today, unfortunately, nationalist pan-Arabism, for example, or pan-Islamism is almost a thing of the past. When you think of Clean Break, this report by the neoconservatives in 1996, they basically talk about the fragmentation of the region into sectarian and ethnic groupings. What's happening in Iraq is bordering on civil strife, and if that leads to a Balkanization or a Lebanonization of the region as a whole, a Balkanization we saw very clearly broke up the former Yugoslavia into smithereens, into several component parts. And I've always maintained that there are those in Israel who believe that Israel should become a dominating minority in a mosaic of minorities. So I say, if you want to recognize the individual component parts of any society, recognize it within pluralism, within working for richness in our diversity. But if we want to have a self-fulfilling prophecy that the region will fragment, then we are reminded of the old colonial adage, divide and rule.
That's right, which unfortunately seems to be happening in many places in the world.
Well, my sadness is that tribalism is increasing. Tribalism, the tribes of the rich, the tribes of the cronies of the rich, the tribes of the intermediaries. The other day in Davos, you spoke of a meeting of over 50% of the world GDP. Now, what cultural affinity do these people have, these huge corporations, with the public at large? Why do you have to have an alternative meeting in Porto Alegre or in Nairobi? Why can't you envisage in this 60th year of the United Nations and Bretton Woods a meeting in which multilateralism is redefined in terms of a new mission, a new comprehensive mission focused on anthrocentric, human dignity approaches rather than security-centric or petrocentric approaches? And the reason for that, I think, is that we're not doing our job in our regions. ECOSOC is only a name in many regions. So we go to the United Nations, we listen to 120 speeches, when in fact we should be going with our own speech. Each region should be presenting its own priorities, having discussed them fully and having established the regional commons that unfortunately we're losing. We're losing the public realm. And that is why, unfortunately, you see this increased tribalism under the name of religion, under the name of hardline ideologies, motivated by material agendas. $65 billion leave the developing world every year to go into the pharmaceutical industry in terms of plant life. And I think the time has come for the countries of the South to recognize these priorities and to recognize in the North also that you can't talk about globalization without a globe.
Indeed, yeah. And then when we talk about extremism, you know, the West tend to equate Islam with extremism. Yes, there are elements of extremism in any religion. Among Muslims who are moderates, why aren't they standing up and defending the cause of moderate Islam?
I think that in the case of the Islamists, from one end of the Muslim world to the other, these are populist movements. They are born of the community itself. They recognize the groundswell of misery, the culture of hatred, and is based on the realities of deprivation. Yes, we're told that the people who founded the Qaeda were wealthy and that many of them are disgruntled people who've studied in the West and come home to compare the wealth and the lifestyle of the West with their own misery, the misery of their people. But I think the time has come to recognize that it's not about Islam and the rest. We have to put the rest to rest. And by that I mean going back to the 100 million job opportunities predicted by the World Bank, for example, in the West Asian, North Africa region. Will they be realized by 2015? Will India address, for example, the subject of poverty by 2040? All of these are predictions, but unfortunately the Gulf region is heating up in terms of a perceived bubble. There's no production base, and I think that as far as the productive capabilities of people culturally, we are not creating, we are not teaching by analogy, we're not putting ourselves in the shoes of the other, the rich in the shoes of the poor. And I think that Islamist slogans are on the increase because of the obvious disasters that are taking place in our Lebanese, Palestinian, Iraqi, Afghani, Sudanese backyard. I mean, let me tell you, I was working with lepers in Sudan in the 80s. Nobody was interested in the humanity of Darfur at that time. Today they're interested, and God knows the situation is very, very moving and very tragic. But at the same time, is it not a fact that oil is going to move from the Red Sea to Cameroon, to the west coast of Africa? Is it not a fact that they have 12 gold mines and huge riches? So I think that the cynical view does get down to the general public. But the most important point is that governments have lost their bedside manner. There is no, we call it ethical governance, but there is no ethical governance anymore.
That's sad. So fighting terrorism is actually, at the end of the day, fighting poverty, ignorance, and unequal opportunities.
And fighting for exactly equal opportunities through creating effective citizenship. 50 million people are born unregistered every year, according to the UNHCR. So what about the racial equality index? What about a call for a humanitarian order? We started in 1988 in the General Assembly, and we've had calls for fundamental rights of humanity, calls for human security. But it seems to me in this world that you can talk about economic order, technological order, security order, but don't talk about humanitarian or humanist. And this is the problem. We had militancy in Latin America in the 70s and 80s before the Cancun conference. So it's not peculiar to the Muslim world.
Indeed. I remember the Red Brigades. Do you remember?
Well, yesterday, of course, we heard of the release of one of the prominent members of the Red Brigades, and we had the Red Brigades even in Jordan in 1970, when the slogan became Amman, the Hanoi of the Arabs. Today, maybe Baghdad is the Hanoi of the mercenaries who have flocked to this war-torn region.
That's right.